Hello everyone, and as of today we now have 55 subscribers, and because of that I will be reading 2 books today, starting out with Whiteout by Kay Leroy and illustrated by Dave Kramer. When Mary Alice woke up, she was startled by silence. She heard no dogs barking, no traffic on the street. Where was the train whistle that usually woke her? Everything seemed so calm and quiet. Mary Alice jumped up and looked out the window. Snow! Everywhere she looked, the whole world outside was white as, well, snow. She ran into the next room to tell her brother Charlie the good news. She jumped on his bed to wake him up. Mary Alice and Charlie raced downstairs. Mom and Robert were already making breakfast. Charlie headed for the door to the yard. "Whoa," said Robert. "Breakfast before play, sport." Robert was their stepfather. Their real father had died when Charlie was 5. Mom had married Robert last year. Mary Alice had warmed to Robert right away. Charlie was still getting used to having someone in his dad's place. "Great," said Charlie with a frown. "Look who made it home last night." "Did you have trouble on the roads, Robert?" Mary Alice asked. Robert had been a player for the Cleveland Browns football team. Now he was a police officer. He often worked late into the night. "Got a ride just in time," said Robert. "Will all this snow?" "The roads will be closed for days. Plows can barely keep up." Mom held up her hand. "Listen. They're talking about the storm on the radio," she said. 6 hours into the blizzard and no end in sight. Folks, we've got a whiteout here, a record snowfall for eastern Ohio. People are warned to stay. The radio went dead. The lights went out too. "Yippee! Power's out," said Charlie. "Who needs lights in the day anyway?" "Got plenty of coal in the cellar though," Robert added. "At least the house will keep warm." But right now Mary Alice and Charlie didn't really care about a warm house. They had snowmen on their minds. They gobbled up their eggs and ran to the door. "Mom, can we go out and play now?" Charlie asked. "Sure," said Mom, "but dress warmly, hats and mittens." Mary Alice and Charlie dashed out the back door into the white swirl of snow. "Stay in the yard," called Robert. "Yes, boss," Charlie replied. The door slammed behind him. Mary Alice had never seen such a deep snow. She and Charlie flopped around in the drifts. They tried to build a snowman. They laughed and threw snowballs. Then Charlie headed up towards the tool shed. He started to climb up on one side. "Hey!" shouted Mary Alice. "What are you doing up there?" "Look at me! I'm super!" yelled Charlie. Before he finished a word, he jumped. He held his arms out like a superhero, but instead of flying, he flopped right into a huge drift of snow. "Ow!" Charlie screamed from under a black pile. Mary Alice couldn't see him. "Charlie!" cried Mary Alice. She tried to run to him, but the snow was so deep it was hard. "My leg!" moaned Charlie. Now Mary Alice could see her brother under the pile of snow. He was crying and holding his right leg. Robert rushed out the back door. He'd heard Charlie scream. He plowed through the snow towards Charlie's red snow hat. "What's the deal there, sport?" he called to Charlie. Robert could barely get through the snow too, but he made it to Charlie before Mary Alice. Charlie saw Robert coming. "I'll be all right," he said. "I don't need any help." He tried to stand. His leg hurt so much he almost passed out. He fell back into the snow. Robert picked Charlie up and carried him into the house without a word. Mary Alice followed. She saw that Charlie was in too much pain to talk. She knew he didn't want to anyway. Robert took off Charlie's boots and gently felt his lower leg. Mary Alice could see that the limb was swollen. Tears filled Charlie's eyes. Robert frowned. "Looks like kind of like a broken leg there, sport," said Robert. "Some ice on it will keep it from swelling more." "I'll get a pan and fill it with snow," said Mary Alice. "Great idea," said Robert. "Snow will work fine." Mom tried to call the doctor, but the phone was dead too. "What'll we do now?" she asked. "Keep Charlie on ice," said Robert. "I'll walk to the police station. There's a hospital in the same street. I'll bet that street has been plowed. I'll find the doctor or something." "But that's miles away," said Mary Alice. "How can you walk that far in this deep snow?" Robert grinned and reached into the coat closet. For a moment, Charlie forgot about his pain. "What are those things?" he asked. "Snowshoes," said Robert. "They let you walk in deep snow. Growing up in Vermont, I used my snowshoes all winter long." They all watched Robert bundle up and strap on the snowshoes. Mary Alice thought he looked like he had tennis rackets on his feet. "Be back with help in a jiff, sport," Robert said to Charlie. "Everything will be okay." Then he disappeared into the blowing white storm. Mary Alice kept getting more snow for Charlie's leg. Mom made peanut butter sandwiches for lunch. Charlie tried not to think about his leg. "Do you think Robert can or get someone to help?" Charlie asked. "Yes," said Mary Alice. "I think Robert can just do about anything." Mom smiled and started to read them a story to pass the time. Mom was getting to the good part. Then all of a sudden, they heard a rumbling noise outside. It was a snowplow, followed by an ambulance. Out of the plow jumped Robert. Robert walked into the house with the ambulance driver. Mary Alice saw Charlie crack a small smile. They all rode in the ambulance with Charlie. Mary Alice could see Charlie staring at Robert. "You're not so bad after all," Charlie finally spoke. "For a guy from Vermont." Robert grinned and said, "Well, Charlie, I guess once you get to know me, I'm not all bad." And the whole family smiled as the ambulance cut through the white walls of snow. The end. And now, on to the next story. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, written by Judy Barrett and drawn by Ron Barrett. We were all sitting around the big kitchen table. It was Saturday morning, pancake morning. Mom was squeezing orange for juice. Henry and I were betting on how many pancakes we each could eat, and Grandpa was doing the flipping. Seconds later, something flew through the air, headed toward the kitchen ceiling, and landed right on Henry. After we realized that the flying object was only a pancake, we all laughed, even Grandpa. Breakfast continued quite uneventfully. All the other pancakes landed on the pan, and all of them were eaten, even the one that landed on Henry. touched off by the pancake incident at breakfast, Grandpa told us the best tall-tale bedtime story he'd ever told. Across an ocean, over lots of huge bumpy mountains, across 3 hot deserts and 1 smaller ocean, there lay the tiny town in Chew and Swallow. In most ways, it was very much like any other tiny town. It had a main street lined with stores, houses with trees, and gardens around them, a school bus, and a schoolhouse, about 300 people, and some assorted cats and dogs. But there was no food stores in the town of Chew and Swallow. They didn't need any. The sky supplied all the food they could possibly want. The only thing that was really different about Chew and Swallow was its weather. It came 3 times a day, at breakfast, lunchtime, and dinner. Everything that everyone ate came from the sky. Whatever the weather served, that was what they ate. But it never rained rain. It never snowed snow. And it never blew just wind. It rained things like soup and juice. It snowed mashed potatoes and green peas. And sometimes the wind blew in storms of hamburgers. The people could watch the weather report on television in the morning, and they would even hear a prediction for the next day's food. When the townspeople went outside, they carried their plates, cups, glasses, forks, spoons, knives, and napkins with them. That way they would always be prepared for any kind of weather. If there were leftovers, and there usually were, the people took them home and put them in their refrigerators in case they got hungry between meals. The menu varied. By the time they woke up in the morning, breakfast was coming down. After a brief shower of orange juice, low clouds of sunny-side-up eggs moved in, followed by pieces of toast, butter and jelly sprinkled down for the toast. And most of the time, it rained milk afterwards. For lunch one day, frankfurters, already in their rolls, blew in from the northwest at about 5 miles an hour. There were mustard clouds nearby. Then the wind shifted to the east and brought in baked beans. A drizzle of soda finished off the meal. Dinner one night consisted of lamb chops, becoming heavy at times with occasional ketchup. Periods of peas and baked potatoes were followed by gradual clearing, with a wonderful jello setting in the west. The sanitation department of Chew and Swallow had a rather unusual job for a sanitation department. It had to remove the food that fell on the houses and sidewalks and lawns. The workers cleaned things up after every meal and fed all the dogs and cats. Then they emptied some of it into a surrounding ocean for the fish and turtles and whales to eat. The rest of the food was put back into the earth so that the soil would be richer for the people's flower gardens. Life for the townspeople was delicious until the weather took a turn for the worse. One day there was nothing but gorgonzola cheese all day long. The next day there was only broccoli, all overcooked. And the next day There was Brussels sprouts and peanut butter with mayonnaise. Another day, there was pea soup fog. No one could see where they were going, and they could barely find the rest of the meal that got stuck in the fog. The food was getting larger and larger, and so were the portions. The people were getting frightened. Violent storms blew up frequently. Awful things were happening. One Tuesday, there was a hurricane of bread and rolls all day long and into the night. There were soft rolls and hard rolls, some with seeds and some without. There was white bread and rye and whole wheat toast. Most of it was larger than they had ever seen bread and rolls before. It was a terrible day. Everyone had to stay indoors. Roofs were damaged, and the sanitation department was beside itself. The mess took the workers 4 days to clean up, and the sea was full of floating rolls. To help out, the people piled up as much bread as they could in their backyards. The birds picked at it a bit, but it just stayed there and got staler and staler. There was a storm of pancakes one morning, and a downpour of maple syrup that nearly flooded the town. A huge pancake covered the school. No one could get it off because its weight, so they had to close the school. Lunch one day brought 15-inch drifts of cream cheese and jelly sandwiches. Everyone ate themselves sick, and the day ended with a stomach ache. There was an awful salt and pepper wind accompanied by an even worse tomato tornado. People were sneezing themselves silly and running to avoid the tomatoes. The town was a mess. There were seeds and pulp everywhere. The sanitation department gave up. The job was too big. Everyone feared for their lives. They couldn't go outside most of the time. Many houses had been badly damaged by giant meatballs. Stores were boarded up, and there was no more school for the children. So a decision was made to abandon the town of Chew and Swallow. It was a matter of survival. The people glued together the giant pieces of stale bread, sandwich style, with peanut butter, took the absolute necessities with them, and set sail on their rafts for new land. After being afloat for a week, they finally reached a small coastal town which welcomed them. The bread had held up surprisingly well enough for them to build temporary houses for themselves out of it. The children began school again, and the adults all tried to find places for themselves in the new land. The biggest change they had to make was getting used to buying food at the supermarket. They found it odd that the food was kept on the shelves, packaged in boxes, cans, and bottles. Meat that had to be cooked was kept in large refrigerators. Nothing came down from the sky except rain and snow. The clouds above their heads were not made of fried eggs. No one ever got hit by a hamburger again, and nobody dared to go back to Chew and Swallow to find out what had happened to it. They were too afraid. Henry and I were awake until the very end of Grandpa's story. I remember his good night kiss. The next morning we woke up to see snow falling outside our window. We ran downstairs for breakfast and ate it a little faster than usual so we could go sledding with Grandpa. It's funny. But even as we were sliding down the hill, we thought we saw a giant pat of butter on top, and we could almost smell mashed potatoes. The end. Have a good sleep. Bye-bye.